Trust is not only fragile, it is sacred. And when someone breaks it, especially with a carefully crafted lie, the wound runs deep. If you've ever felt that gut punch upon discovering that someone close to you was never honest, you're not alone. Liars don't always reveal themselves with obvious signs. In fact, the most dangerous ones often wrap themselves in charm, asking questions that seem innocent, but are actually calculated traps. These are not just simple questions, they are weapons. And if you don't catch the signs, you might not see the betrayal coming until it's far too late. In this content, I'm going to reveal 5 specific questions that manipulative people use to fake connection while secretly pulling your strings. These tactics are subtle, strategic, and sadly common. Whether in personal relationships, work environments, or even casual everyday conversations. If you've ever asked yourself, "How did I not see it sooner?" This is for you. Each question I'll show you builds on the last so you can clearly understand exactly how liars construct trust, only to later destroy it. Don't skip a second, because what you learn today could save you years of regret and help you develop the inner strength that Stoicism teaches: calm, clarity, and control. You are not powerless. You're about to see what they never wanted you to notice. And if you're already tired of being manipulated and want to learn to trust yourself more than anyone else, subscribe and join me. Let's get into it. Why people lie. People don't lie only because they're bad. They do it because they're afraid, because they want control, or because something inside them is broken. This is not an excuse, it's the raw truth behind most deceptions. If you've ever wondered, why would someone do this to me? You've already taken the first step toward learning how to spot it. Understanding the psychology of lying isn't just about identifying it. It's about seeing the motivations that drive someone to betray trust, even their own. Fear is the most common trigger. Fear of rejection, of losing power, of being seen as weak, or of making mistakes. Someone might lie to hide an error, to avoid conflict, or to hold on to a relationship they feel slipping away. And lies in the beginning aren't always born of malice. But over time, small falsehoods pile up until the person ends up living inside the story they've invented. At that point, you're no longer dealing with someone who is simply afraid. You're dealing with someone willing to hurt you just to avoid their own discomfort. Then there's control. Some people lie to manipulate the narrative. They deflect blame, distort facts, or plant seeds of doubt. This isn't emotional, it's calculated. They know exactly what they're doing. It's about power, about staying one step ahead, about making you question your own instincts so they can move freely in the fog of confusion. This type of lying is especially cruel because it erodes your sense of reality. You start to wonder if you're overreacting, if you misunderstood, if it's your fault. And that's no accident. That's exactly the goal. Finally, there's the lie that stems from a damaged personality. Narcissists, for example, lie to preserve a grand image. They don't just want admiration, they need it. They feel entitled to special treatment and lie to maintain that illusion. People with antisocial traits, on the other hand, can lie without feeling an ounce of guilt. They have no moral compass, no empathy. They use lies as tools to manipulate, to avoid consequences, or to come out on top. They are often charismatic and even likable on the surface, but they are deeply disconnected from the harm they cause. What they do isn't an accident, they simply don't care. Understanding why someone lies doesn't make the lie any less dangerous. On the contrary, it helps you see that not everyone who speaks kindly has good intentions. Some become so skilled at hiding the truth that you don't realize you're being manipulated until it's too late. However, they always leave clues, especially in the questions they ask. If someone asks you any of these 5 questions, be careful. They may not be looking for the truth. They may be looking to control you. Question number 1. Don't you trust me? When you understand the reasons why people lie, whether it's out of fear, a need for control, or a distorted mind, you begin to spot the patterns they use to manipulate. But recognizing a lie is only half the battle. The hardest part is identifying how it feels when it's actually happening. Manipulation rarely shows up as a direct threat. It comes disguised as guilt, pressure, or subtle emotional hooks that make you question yourself more than the person in front of you. And one of the most common and dangerous phrases in this manipulation game is just 3 simple words. Don't you trust me? At first glance, it sounds innocent, even hurt, as if coming from someone misunderstood. But look closer. It's not a request for understanding. It's a demand for submission. It's not about truth, it's about silencing your doubts. Imagine this scenario. You're already feeling unsure, with that inner sense that something doesn't add up. You ask a reasonable question, looking for clarity, and instead of getting an answer, you get a wounded expression and this emotionally loaded phrase. Suddenly, the focus shifts. It's no longer about the facts, but about you, about your supposed lack of trust. You end up feeling like the villain just for asking for an explanation. This is emotional blackmail in its quietest form, a calculated move that plays on your desire to keep the peace, to be considerate, to avoid conflict. The more self-aware and conciliatory you are, the more likely you are to give in to this pressure. You tell yourself maybe you overreacted, that your question wasn't necessary, and then you let it slide. They get exactly what they wanted: your silence, your doubt, and most importantly, your permission. Stoicism offers a very different response. Epictetus said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, understand that your mind has cooperated with it." It's a harsh truth, but a liberating one, because it reminds us that manipulation only works when we hand over control of our judgment to someone else. A Stoic doesn't let emotional manipulation override reason. They hear, "Don't you trust me?" and refuse to be pulled into guilt. They stand firm in what they know. Trust is not demanded. It is earned over time, with transparency, not with emotional coercion. One of the most dangerous mistakes, especially among well-intentioned people, is confusing trust with blind acceptance. Believing that questioning someone is offending them, or that setting boundaries is creating conflict. But avoiding hard questions when something doesn't feel right is not kindness. It's ignoring your own intuition. And often behind that is fear. Fear of tension, of being seen as difficult, of ruining the moment. That fear is the doorway manipulators walk through. The solution isn't confrontation for the sake of drama, nor is it cold distancing. It's serene clarity, the quiet strength to hold your ground even when someone tries to corner you emotionally. It's answering without anger or apology, but with calm truth. Trust is earned with transparency. It is not demanded through guilt. That phrase completely changes the dynamic. It shifts responsibility back to actions, not emotions. It breaks the manipulation without triggering unnecessary conflict. It protects your peace without closing your heart. That is the core of Stoic thinking. Don't let someone else's emotions dictate your decisions. Don't turn the guilt others impose on you into your moral compass. Your judgment, your reason, and your inner clarity are your true guides. If someone tries to hijack them with shame or emotional pressure, it's not a sign to retreat. It's a sign to stand firm. You don't have to be cold to be strong, nor distrustful to be wise. But you do need to stop giving the benefit of the doubt when your intuition and the facts are telling you otherwise. Stoicism doesn't ask you to see the worst in people. It asks you to see clearly, to respond with reason, and to remember that your peace is not something you owe to anyone. It's something you must protect, especially from those who try to buy your silence with guilt. Question number 2. Why would I lie? Within the arsenal of a manipulative liar, few moves are as effective as hiding behind a question that, on the surface, appears logical and reasonable, but is actually designed to shut down your suspicion. Why would I lie? It's not a question meant to clarify. It's a maneuver to make you doubt yourself. It's not intended to open a conversation, but to close it. And the problem is that this tactic works alarmingly well, especially on people who don't want to think badly of others. That's where the trap lies, a false sense of logic that can have very real consequences. When someone says to you, "Why would I lie?" what they're really doing is shifting the focus from their behavior to your judgment. It's a rhetorical strategy that suggests their honesty is so obvious it doesn't need to be questioned, whether because of their reputation, the relationship you've built, or the apparent lack of any obvious reason to deceive. But the truth is, lies don't always stem from clear or visible motives, at least not ones you can see. Sometimes people lie to protect their ego, to maintain an advantage, or to preserve an image. Other times, lying is simply a habit, and in some cases they do it because they assume you won't look any deeper. Let's look at an example. A man sits across from an insurance agent. The agent appears confident, relaxed, even friendly. He says he's been in the business for over 30 years and assures over and over that the plan he's offering is simple. No hidden fees, nothing to worry about. When the client hesitates and asks for clarification, the agent leans back in his chair and responds, "Why would I lie? I've built my entire career on trust." The tone is calm, even slightly offended. The implication is clear. If you doubt him, you're insulting him. Not wanting to seem paranoid, the client drops the issue and signs the contract. Weeks later, he discovers a clause buried in the fine print that makes the policy far less favorable than it seemed. The damage is done, and the most painful part isn't just the financial loss, but the betrayal. Realizing his intuition was right, but he ignored it because someone convinced him it was irrational to distrust. That's the danger of false logic. Just because someone says they have no reason to lie doesn't mean they're telling the truth. The truth doesn't depend on how believable someone seems. It depends on facts, on evidence, and on present actions, not on a carefully crafted story. This is where Stoicism becomes a shield. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." A direct, demanding reminder of integrity, but also a guide for where to place our trust, not in reputation, not in personality, but in the righteousness of the action itself. A Stoic doesn't get distracted by someone's resume or charisma. They ask, "Is this true right now? Is it aligned with reality? Can I verify it myself?" That kind of thinking cuts through emotional noise and social manipulation. It gives you the courage to question what doesn't add up, even if it comes from someone who seems trustworthy, especially if they seem trustworthy. One of the most common mistakes is believing that every liar must have a clear, logical, and visible motive, and thinking that if we can't see that motive, there can't be a lie. But people don't always act logically. Some lie instinctively, others to avoid discomfort even in trivial matters, and others simply to see if they can get away with it. If you wait to find a valid reason before allowing yourself to doubt, you've already handed your judgment over to someone else's narrative. That's not prudence, it's self-deception. This doesn't mean living in a constant state of distrust. Stoicism is not about becoming cynical or building emotional walls. It's about having clarity. It's about not confusing confidence with proof, about knowing that a rational question is not disrespect, it's a necessity. And if someone responds to your questions with emotional manipulation, evasions, or by changing the subject, there's your answer. Not the one they gave, but the one they revealed through their reaction. Think about this. Honest people are not afraid of being questioned. They accept it, even appreciate it, because they have nothing to hide. Only the dishonest feel threatened by scrutiny. So next time you hear, "Why would I lie?" take a deep breath and remember, it's not your job to prove they would lie. It's their responsibility to prove they aren't. And if they can't do that without defensiveness or distractions, you have every right to dig deeper, to ask with more firmness, and to protect yourself. Question number 3. Can you keep a secret? There's a kind of manipulation that doesn't feel like manipulation at all. In fact, it feels like closeness, like a gesture of trust, as if you're being invited into a private circle where only a few have access. It usually starts with a lowered voice, a quick glance to the sides, and that disarming question, "Can you keep a secret?" At first glance, it seems innocent, even flattering, like an invitation to share something special. But many times what it creates is something far more dangerous, an invisible contract, one you didn't consciously agree to, but that you suddenly feel obligated to uphold. In many cases, that false sense of intimacy is used to push your moral boundaries and blur your sense of what's right. The problem with that question is that it jumps over your values and goes straight to your sense of loyalty. It doesn't ask whether you should keep the secret. It assumes you will. It starts from the premise that your silence is guaranteed, and with that it sets a trap. Not with force, but with the emotional weight of supposed trust. When someone frames information as secret, they're implicitly telling you that now you owe them something, that you're part of something with that person, and that speaking about it or questioning it would be a betrayal. That's where the manipulation hides. Not so much in the content of the secret, but in the subtle pressure it exerts on your conscience. Consider Rachel's case. She worked in a small office where everything felt personal and informal. One afternoon, a coworker pulled her aside and, in a confidential tone, said he had something serious to tell her, but only if she promised not to tell anyone. Out of courtesy and curiosity, Rachel agreed. Then the coworker confessed that their boss was mishandling company funds and covering it up. It wasn't simple gossip, it was a serious ethical breach. But Rachel was trapped. She had agreed to keep a secret that collided head-on with her values. Speaking up would mean betraying the trust of someone she worked with daily. Staying silent would mean becoming a silent accomplice to something deeply wrong. All because she said yes to that simple question. This kind of dynamic is deeply manipulative because it relies on an illusion of closeness. It uses your desire to be a loyal person to manipulate you. It makes silence feel like solidarity, and for those who value loyalty and harmony, that emotional pressure can be almost impossible to resist. But the truth is, not every secret deserves to be kept. And the fact that someone asks for your loyalty doesn't mean they deserve it. The Stoics understood this clearly. Seneca wrote, "No evil inclination of the human heart is so powerful that it cannot be mastered with discipline." In today's terms, it means that no matter how strong the temptation to stay quiet to protect someone, you always have the capacity to act differently. But that requires discipline, clarity, and the willingness to feel uncomfortable in defense of what is right. Stoicism doesn't teach you to be cold. It teaches you to maintain your ethical boundaries even when others try to erase them with false intimacy. Rachel's mistake wasn't in listening, it was in committing too quickly to a loyalty that hadn't been earned. She confused confidentiality with complicity, and she paid the price, not with a scandal, but with months of anxiety, doubt, and the quiet erosion of her integrity. The lesson she learned, hard but valuable, was simple. Before promising to keep a secret, you must ask whether that secret aligns with your values. If it doesn't, you don't owe anyone your silence, least of all someone who tries to buy it with a whisper. This is the kind of inner discipline the Stoics practiced. The ability to pause in the moment, see beyond emotional pressure, and act according to your principles, not impulse. When someone tries to make you part of a secret that makes you uncomfortable or goes against what you consider right, you don't owe them protection. You owe yourself honesty, you owe yourself peace of mind, and you owe the truth its right to come to light. When false loyalty demands that you compromise your values, it stops being loyalty and becomes control. And the most powerful thing you can do in that moment is simply say no, calmly and firmly. Question number 4. Who told you that? Why is it that when you confront someone with an uncomfortable truth, their first question isn't whether it's true, but who told you that? It's not about genuine curiosity or confusion, it's about control. This question is a tactical move designed to shift the focus. It's not meant to clarify the facts, but to discredit them. The goal is no longer to talk about the truth or take responsibility. It's now about tracing the information, measuring loyalties, and making you feel like you did something wrong simply by knowing what you know. This psychological trick is more common than we think, especially when the person being questioned has something to hide. Instead of answering directly, they divert the conversation. They want to know the source, not the content. The moment you hear who told you that, you've entered a different game, one designed to pull your attention away from their actions and turn it back on you. It's a classic power move, and it works because it plants doubt. Suddenly, you're not sure if you crossed a line. You start wondering whether you should have heard or received that information at all. But the truth is, if someone tries to steer you away from the facts, It's because they know their position is weak. And no matter how calm or confident their voice sounds when they ask that question, it's still a mask. A maneuver to avoid being held accountable for something they already know is wrong. Let's look at a large-scale example, the case of Lance Armstrong. For years, he was the dominant figure in professional cycling, a symbol of success and resilience. But behind the scenes, accusations of performance-enhancing drug use were piling up. When questioned, Armstrong rarely addressed the evidence directly. Instead, he attacked the sources, questioned the motives of those speaking out, and discredited the whistleblowers. "Who says that?" became his shield. And for a long time, it worked. People hesitated to accuse without irrefutable proof, getting lost in the drama of who said what, instead of focusing on the key question, is it true? That's the risk of this tactic. It shifts the center of the debate, pulling it away from the truth and into the realm of information politics. It turns a moral issue into a test of loyalty. And for the person caught in the middle, it creates a mental fog that erodes confidence in their own judgment. You stop asking yourself if the fact is true and start wondering if the problem is that you know what you know. Stoic philosophy offers a way out of this trap. Epictetus said, "Do not seek the favor of the crowd. It is rarely obtained by honest and lawful means." In other words, someone who lives with integrity doesn't obsess over controlling what others say. They don't rush to hunt down informants or manipulate narratives. They face what's in front of them with calm and clarity. Stoicism teaches that the truth stands on its own. It doesn't need to be protected by secrecy, nor does it collapse because someone whispers it. When someone responds with, "Who told you that?" they're revealing their real priorities, not truth, not repair, but control. They want to manage perception, not correct behavior. That question is their shield, their distraction, their tactic to buy time. The Stoic response is to refuse to follow that detour and to stand firm. Let's focus on whether it's true, not on who said it. In the end, a person's character isn't measured by how they react when praised, but by how they respond when questioned. When the truth corners them, do they face it or do they look for someone to blame? That's a test we will all have to face at some point. And when it comes, your task won't be to trace sources or justify why you have the right to ask. Your task will be to hold the line, to avoid being pulled away, to demand substance over distractions. Has anyone ever tried to dodge responsibility by asking you how you got certain information, instead of addressing whether it was true? What did you do in that moment, and what do you wish you had said? Your experience might help someone else hold their ground when they need it most. Question number 5. Don't you remember? What happens when someone insists you said or agreed to something you are absolutely certain never happened? You stop, you try to recall, you start doubting yourself. And in that brief moment of hesitation, they plant the seed of control. This simple question, "Don't you remember?" can become the gateway to something far more destructive: gaslighting. It's not just about rewriting the past, it's about making you doubt your very ability to perceive reality. Gaslighting is one of the most corrosive forms of psychological manipulation because it doesn't just attack your ideas, it attacks your mind. It creates confusion and then uses that confusion as leverage to gain control. Over time, you stop trusting your memory and start relying on the other person's version of events. Not because it makes sense, but because they say it with so much certainty, detail, and calmness that they make you feel like the problem is you. And that's the heart of the trap. This pattern often begins subtly. A partner, a friend, or a coworker claims that an agreement was made, one that goes against your values, your plans, or your recollection of events. When you question it, they react with surprise or even apparent sadness, saying they can't believe you don't remember. Their tone is calm but firm, sending a clear message: you're the one who's wrong. While you search your memory for any sign that could confirm their version, your uncertainty becomes their opportunity. They don't just offer a different version of the facts, they replace yours entirely. At that point, a dangerous dynamic forms. The manipulator presents themselves as the stable, rational one, while you are cast as the confused or emotional one. But none of this is accidental. The more they undermine your confidence in your own perception, the more dependent you become on theirs. The ultimate goal isn't to win an argument, it's to own your reality. Imagine a common example. You've been in a relationship for years and suddenly your partner tells you that you both agreed to make a major decision, to change careers, move to another city, or make a significant investment. You have no memory of this conversation, and you're certain you would have objected. But instead of having an open discussion, that person insists not only that you agreed, but that you were excited about it. They even add precise details: where you were, what you were wearing, the exact time of day. The details sound convincing, yet they don't fit at all with the reality you remember. Still, you start to wonder, could I have forgotten? Am I overreacting? This is not a memory lapse, it's psychological pressure. If this pattern repeats, the emotional toll adds up. You end up not questioning or offering opinions, not because you don't care, but because you no longer trust your own voice. Stoicism offers a powerful antidote, not through direct confrontation, but through inner discipline. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." In the context of gaslighting, this means that no one has the right to rewrite your reality. Your mind, your perception, your reasoning, and your memory belong to you. The moment you hand them over to someone else, you lose not just clarity, but sovereignty. The Stoic does not seek constant validation from others, nor do they crumble under someone else's apparent certainty. They remain firm in what they know, and if there is doubt, they lean on evidence, not emotional approval. If your memory wavers, trust your notes, your records, your direct experiences. The key is not to get caught in endless arguments to win, but to anchor yourself to what is real. That's why it's important to create habits that strengthen your perception. Write down important agreements. Confirm commitments in writing. Reflect regularly on your experiences. These practices are not to make you paranoid, but to give you a solid point of reference when someone tries to distort what you know. And remember, just because someone speaks with absolute certainty doesn't mean they're telling the truth. Some people learn that certainty is a weapon, that a firm tone can overpower facts, and that repeating something over and over can rewrite it in your mind. But the Stoic sees through that. They don't respond with more volume or more emotion. They respond with principles, with clarity, and with self-confidence. Gaslighting only works when you start believing that someone else has a clearer view of your life than you do. But that's false, they never did. The moment you reclaim control over your perception, through awareness, reflection, and discipline, you also reclaim your power, not just over that moment, but over your mind and your life. If you've made it this far, you already know. Liars don't just tell falsehoods, they ask questions designed to disarm you, to make you doubt yourself, to pull you into their story while silently rewriting yours. These 5 questions may seem harmless, but now you recognize the pattern, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The real power isn't just in unmasking them, it's in protecting yourself. Choosing awareness over naivety, calm over confusion, truth over emotional traps. You don't need to expose anyone dramatically. It's enough to remain firm, alert, and clear. Your mind is not for sale, and your life is not a board where others move the pieces. So the next time someone throws one of these questions at you, pause, breathe, and remember what you've learned here. You're not just surviving manipulation, you're rising above it. If this message sparked something in you, made you reflect, or finally helped you understand something you hadn't seen before, subscribe and join us in this space where we speak the truth, sharpen our instincts, and take back control, one calm realization at a time. Because trust once broken is hard to rebuild. But trust in yourself is the foundation of everything. Stay strong, stay aware, and I'll see you in the next conversation.